Emma Parker never expected a $5 purchase to change her life. It was a bright Saturday morning in a quiet English town. The streets were busy with families enjoying the warm weather. Small cafes were filled with people chatting over coffee, and local shops had their doors wide open. Emma had always loved visiting charity shops and weekend markets. Not because she needed anything. She simply enjoyed finding unusual items with stories behind them. That morning, she walked into a small second-hand store near the town center. The place was packed with old furniture, books, clocks, and paintings. Most people walked past the artwork without paying much attention. Emma almost did the same. Then something caught her eye. A small painting leaned against a wooden shelf. It showed a peaceful countryside scene. A narrow road stretched across green fields. A few trees stood near a stone cottage. The painting wasn't particularly impressive. In fact, it looked ordinary. Yet Emma felt strangely drawn to it. She picked it up and looked closer. The frame was slightly worn. The colors looked faded from age. A small sticker on the back read, $5. Emma smiled. For $5, why not? She thought. She carried it to the counter. The elderly shopkeeper barely glanced at it. Good choice, he said. That one's been here a while. Emma paid and headed home. The painting sat in the backseat of her car during the short drive. As she drove, she occasionally glanced at it through the mirror. For some reason, she couldn't stop thinking about it. When she arrived home, she placed it on the dining table. Sunlight streamed through the large windows. The bright light revealed details she hadn't noticed before. Tiny brushstrokes covered the fields. The road appeared unusually detailed, almost as if the artist wanted people to pay attention to it. Emma tilted her head. Interesting, she whispered. She spent the afternoon cleaning her house. Every now and then she looked toward the painting. The feeling remained. Something about it seemed different. By lunchtime, curiosity got the better of her. She picked it up again. This time she examined every corner. The frame looked older than she first thought, perhaps much older. A small mark appeared near one edge. It looked intentional. Not damage. Not wear. A symbol. Emma couldn't recognize it. She grabbed her phone and searched online. Nothing matched. The symbol wasn't familiar. Hours passed. Most people would have forgotten about it. Emma couldn't. That evening, while organizing books on a shelf, she accidentally bumped the painting. A faint sound came from inside the frame. She froze. The noise wasn't loud, but it definitely wasn't normal. Emma lifted the painting carefully. She gently shook it. Again, a soft sound. Something was there. Her heart began beating faster. The painting seemed ordinary, yet clearly it wasn't. She placed it back on the table. For several minutes, she simply stared at it. Questions raced through her mind. Who painted it? Why did it end up in a charity shop? And what exactly was causing that sound? The next morning, Emma took the painting to a local art store. The owner was a friendly man named David. He had spent decades restoring old artwork. David examined the painting carefully. Then he frowned. That's unusual. Emma immediately noticed. What is? David pointed toward the frame. This design is older than the painting itself. Emma looked confused. What do you mean? The frame and the artwork don't belong together. That answer only created more questions. David continued studying it. The frame could be over 100 years old. Emma blinked. 100 years? David nodded. Possibly more. Emma felt a chill despite the warm afternoon. How could a simple $5 painting have such an old frame? Before leaving, she asked another question. Do you recognize the artist? David shook his head. No signature. No records. Nothing. Emma thanked him and drove home. But her curiosity had become an obsession. That evening she sat at her dining table again. The painting stood in front of her. The symbol, the old frame, the strange sound, none of it made sense. Then she noticed something she had missed before. The painted road in the artwork wasn't random. It formed a very specific shape, a shape that looked almost identical to the mysterious symbol on the frame. Emma leaned closer. Her eyes widened. That couldn't be a coincidence. For the first time, she realized the painting might not simply be artwork. It might be a message And somewhere within that message was a secret someone had never expected her to find. What Emma didn't know was that another person had been searching for that same painting for nearly 20 years. And by the time she discovered the truth, it would lead her to a story no one in town had ever heard before. The next morning arrived bright and calm, with sunlight pouring through Emma's kitchen window. But she didn't feel calm at all. The painting stood on her dining table, like it had been waiting for her all night. Every time she looked at it, she felt the same strange pull she couldn't explain. It was no longer just an old artwork. It felt like a question that needed an answer. Emma decided she couldn't ignore it anymore. She needed to understand what she had found. Later that morning, she returned to the small art store. The streets were busy with people heading to work, cafes opening, and delivery vans moving through town. Everything looked normal, but Emma's mind wasn't on any of it. Inside the shop, David was already working behind the counter. He looked up as she entered. "You came back quickly," he said with a half smile. Emma placed the painting carefully on the counter. "I couldn't stop thinking about it," she replied. David nodded slowly. "That usually means there's something worth finding out." He took the painting again and placed it under a brighter lamp. For several minutes, he said nothing, just observed. Emma waited, feeling her heartbeat rise with every passing second. Finally, David spoke. "This is not a simple market piece," he said. Emma leaned forward. "What do you mean?" David pointed at the brushwork. "The style here, it's layered, multiple techniques, not one artist's usual method." Emma frowned. "So it could be fake?" David shook his head immediately. "No, not fake. Complicated." That word stayed in the air. Complicated. He rotated the frame gently. "This frame is far older than the painting itself. That part I'm sure about." Emma crossed her arms. "But why would someone combine them?" David didn't answer right away. Instead, he examined the back edges again. Then he paused. His expression changed slightly. "Have you ever seen anything like this before?" he asked. He pointed at the same strange symbol Emma had noticed earlier. She shook her head. "No. I searched it. Nothing came up." David exhaled slowly. "That's because it's not modern." Emma felt a strange tension rise in the room. David continued. "This marking, it's similar to symbols used by private art circles in the late 1800s in England." Emma blinked. "Private art circles?" "Yes," David said. "Small groups of collectors and artists. They sometimes use coded markings to identify works linked to them." Emma stared at the painting again. "So this could be connected to something over 100 years old?" David nodded. "Possibly." A silence followed. Outside, people walked past the shop window without knowing anything unusual was happening inside. Emma felt like she was standing at the edge of something much bigger than she expected. Then David added something that changed everything. "You said there's a sound inside the frame?" Emma nodded quickly. "Yes, like something loose." David carefully lifted the frame again. He tapped lightly along the edges, then stopped at one corner. "That's not normal," he said quietly. Emma stepped closer. "What is it?" David looked at her. "There's a second layer here." Emma frowned. "A second layer?" He turned the painting slightly. "If I'm right, this frame wasn't just built to hold the artwork." He hesitated. "It was built to protect something." Emma's stomach tightened. "Protect what?" David didn't answer immediately. Instead, he handed the painting back to her. "You should be very careful with this," he said. That was not reassuring. That evening, Emma sat again at her dining table. The house was quiet. Sunlight stretched across the wooden surface where the painting rested. She studied it from every angle. The countryside scene now felt different. The road no longer looked like just a path. It felt intentional, structured, almost mathematical. Emma pulled out a notebook and began sketching the symbol again. Then she compared it to the road in the painting. Slowly, she noticed something. The bends of the road weren't random. They followed a pattern, a repeating structure, like a code. Her heart began to race. She tried flipping the painting upside down. Nothing. Then sideways. Still nothing. But when she traced the road carefully with her finger, something clicked in her mind. The pattern wasn't meant to be seen directly. It was meant to be interpreted. Emma grabbed her phone and started searching again. This time, she didn't search the symbol alone. She searched combinations, old art symbols, private collector marks, England 1800s coded paintings. Hours passed. Then finally, she found something, a reference in an old archive listing. A brief mention of a series of encoded landscape works created by unknown artists in the late 19th century. They were said to contain messages only visible through structural interpretation of form. Emma read the line twice. Messages, not paintings. Messages. Her hands tightened around her phone. If this was true, then the painting in her home wasn't random at all. It was part of something larger, something that had survived for over a century without being noticed. The next morning, Emma returned to David again, but this time he was not alone. A second man stood beside him, older, well-dressed, carefully observing the painting before she even entered the room. David introduced him. This is Mr. Alan Whitmore. He studies historical art networks. Alan nodded politely, but his eyes were fixed on the painting. I've seen something similar once, he said quietly. Emma felt a chill. Where? She asked. Alan hesitated. In a private collection that was later sold off, under unusual circumstances. David and Emma exchanged a look. Alan stepped closer. If this painting is what I think it is, he said, then it is not just valuable. He paused. It is part of a sequence. Emma's voice dropped. A sequence of what? Alan finally looked at her. A series of artworks that were never meant to be found separately. Emma's breath slowed. You're saying there are more? Alan nodded. And if you have one piece, it usually means others are still out there. Emma looked down at the painting. For the first time, she realized the truth was no longer just about what she had bought. It was about what she might now be connected to. And somewhere out there in the daylight world she passed every day, other pieces might already be waiting to be discovered. And someone else might already be looking for them too. The room felt different after Alan Whitmore spoke. Not louder, not brighter, just heavier, as if the air itself had changed. Emma stood in front of the painting, her thoughts moving faster than she could speak. A sequence, not just one artwork, but part of something larger, something incomplete. Outside, the late morning sun filled the street with warm light. People walked past the windows of the art shop in their usual routines. Coffee cups, shopping bags, casual conversations. Completely unaware that something small and quiet on a counter had just shifted everything. Emma finally spoke. If there are more pieces, how we find them? Alan didn't answer immediately. He studied her first, as if deciding how much truth to give. That depends, he said carefully. Some were sold. Some were lost. Some are still in private hands. And some may have already been sitting in ordinary places for years without anyone realizing. David crossed his arms. And you believe this one is part of it? Alan nodded once. More than believe. I recognize the structure. He pointed gently at the painting. The road, the angles, even the space in between trees. It follows a deliberate pattern. It's not decorative. It's functional. Emma looked closer again, now that he mentioned it. She couldn't unsee it. The countryside scene no longer felt like a simple landscape. It felt constructed, like every brushstroke had a purpose beyond beauty. Alan continued. In the late 1800s, a small group of European artists experimented with encoded visual structures. They believed information could be hidden inside composition itself, not words, not symbols alone, but geometry inside art. Emma's mind struggled to keep up. So, this painting is like a message system? Alan nodded slightly. In a way, yes. David leaned forward. But why would someone do that? Alan paused. That is the part history never fully explained. A silence followed. Emma's eyes drifted to the painting again. A message system, encoded inside something she bought for $5 in a small shop. It didn't feel real. And yet, it was sitting right in front of her. She made a decision. I want to understand it, she said firmly. Alan seemed to expect that answer. Then we start carefully, he replied. Over the next hour, the three of them studied the painting together. They laid it flat under a large window where daylight made every detail sharper. Emma traced the road again with her finger. Alan sketched the structure beside it on paper. David measured the frame edges. Slowly, something began to emerge. The road wasn't random at all. It curved in a repeating interval pattern. 3 bends, a pause in visual density, then another set of 3. Alan tapped the paper. That's a repeating sequence, he said, almost like a coded rhythm. Emma frowned. But what does it point to? Alan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned the painting slightly and aligned it with the sketch. Then something subtle changed. A portion of the countryside. Previously just fields, now aligned with the frame measurements in a precise way. Emma felt a sudden tightening in her chest. It's aligning with something outside the painting, she said quietly. Alan nodded. Yes, that's what makes this system different. David looked between them. You're saying the painting connects to real-world locations? Alan replied simply. In theory, yes. Emma stepped back slightly. So this isn't just art. Alan looked at her. No, it's directional. The word landed heavily. Directional. Like a guide. Like something pointing somewhere. Emma suddenly thought of something. If this is part of sequence, then maybe the others form something bigger when combined? Alan's expression changed slightly. That is exactly the hypothesis some researchers had. David raised an eyebrow. Had? Alan hesitated. Most of those researchers stopped publishing their work after a certain point. The room grew quieter. Emma didn't ask why. She didn't need to. Instead, she focused on the painting again. A thought formed in her mind. If this painting is one part, where does it lead? Alan picked up a pencil and marked a point on the sketch. If the pattern continues consistently, he said, then the structure points toward a second reference coordinate. Emma blinked. A coordinate? Alan nodded. Not GPS in modern terms, but a map position relative to landmarks that still exist today. David leaned in. And can we identify it? Alan studied the pattern one more time. Yes, he said slowly. I think we can narrow it down. Hours passed as they worked through the structure. Emma didn't notice time moving. She only noticed the growing certainty that this wasn't random curiosity anymore. It was becoming a path. Eventually, Alan wrote down a rough location, a place within the UK countryside, not far from where Emma lived. A quiet historical area known for old estates and preserved land routes. Emma stared at it. This is real. Alan nodded. If the pattern holds, yes. David exhaled. So what now? Alan looked at Emma. Now we decide how far you want to go. That question lingered. Emma looked at the painting. She thought about the $5 she had paid without a second thought. She thought about how ordinary it had seemed. And she thought about how nothing about it felt ordinary anymore. I want to see it, she said. Alan nodded once. Then tomorrow morning we go. The next morning arrived bright and clear. Emma, David, and Alan met near the edge of town where the roads opened into countryside routes. The air was fresh and still. Fields stretched into the distance under a wide sky. It felt peaceful, normal. Nothing about it suggested anything unusual was about to happen. But Emma carried the painting carefully in a protective case. And every few minutes, she glanced at it. As they traveled, Alan explained more. These systems were designed to survive time, he said. Even if separated, each piece carries partial meaning. Alone, it looks like art. Together, it becomes structure. David shook his head slightly. It's unbelievable how something like this can stay unnoticed for so long. Alan replied calmly. That's exactly why it worked. They arrived at a quiet countryside location just after midday. Old stone walls lined parts of the path. Trees stood at measured intervals, almost too evenly spaced. Emma felt something familiar. She opened the painting again, and for the first time, she noticed something new. The arrangement of trees outside matched part of the painting's structure. Her breath caught. Look, she said. Alan followed her gaze. He didn't speak for a moment. Then he simply said, We're in the correct place. Emma stepped forward slowly. The painting was no longer just an object she owned. It felt like it was reacting to the place itself, as if confirming they had reached the right point. Alan took out his notes and compared them with the surroundings. Then he pointed toward a subtle bend in the land path ahead. That's it, he said quietly. Emma looked. It didn't look special at first, just a natural curve in the landscape. But when she aligned the painting visually with it, the connection became undeniable. The structure matched perfectly. David looked stunned. So it really leads here? Alan nodded. Yes. Emma stood still, holding the painting tightly. And what does it lead to? She asked. Alan hesitated. That, he said, is what we still don't fully know. A silence followed. Then Alan added something that shifted everything again. But every record we've seen suggests the system was never meant to reveal wealth or objects. He looked at Emma. It was meant to preserve something far more important. Emma felt a chill. What? Alan looked at the landscape ahead. Information. Emma's grip tightened. And if we've reached the next point, Alan, finish your thought. Then the next step is already waiting. Emma looked forward at the countryside path stretching ahead in the daylight. Simple, quiet, completely ordinary to anyone passing by. But now she knew better. Nothing about it was ordinary anymore. And somewhere ahead, beyond what they could currently see, another piece of the sequence was waiting to be discovered. And this time, it might not just change what she understood. It might change who else was watching.